Hey guys, how's it going? So today I am going to talk about two games that are very dear to me, and I'm going to go ahead and review them in 2020, and that is the game Paladins and Overwatch. Now, in this review, I am going to cover a couple different topics, with the topics being gameplay, matchmaking, heroes, player base, and finally which game is better. So without further ado, let's go ahead and hop right into it. Alright, so the first thing I want to cover is the gameplay for both Overwatch and Paladins. So starting off with Paladins, your PvP game modes are Siege, which is a push the payload type of game mode. Next, we got Team Deathmatch, which requires each team to get a certain amount of kills to win the game. Then, lastly, we got a game mode called Onslaught, which requires the teams to capture an objective on the map. Now, there is also a variant of Onslaught. It's still categorized as Onslaught, but it's called King of the Hill. Now, what this game mode is, it's essentially Onslaught, but instead of one particular area, you are capturing points just around the map in random areas. So that is the gameplay for Paladins. Now let's go ahead and cover Overwatch. Alright, so going over Overwatch's PvP game modes, these game modes are Escort, Assault, Control, and Hybrid. So let's go ahead and cover the Escort game mode. Now in this game mode, it has an offensive team and a defensive team. The offensive team must push the payload to the delivery point, which is on the other side of the map. Now each map has around 2 to 3 checkpoints, and they get more time to push the payload if they reach that checkpoint, and obviously the defensive team must stop them until time runs out. The assault game mode requires the offensive team to capture 2 points on the map, and the defensive team must stop them until time runs out. And then we got the control game mode. It has both teams fighting for a control point on the map. The team with 2 out of 3 wins gets the ultimate win, so obviously they got to capture, or at least win 2 rounds rather, to win the whole game. The last game mode for Overwatch is Hybrid. This game mode is a hybrid of Assault and Escort. The offensive team must capture the point and push the payload, while the defensive team tries to stop them. Now, there is also the arcade section of Overwatch that has a bunch of different fun game modes and all of that. I decided not to include it as a game mode because, one, it would take too long to list, and on top of it, those really aren't the main PvP modes. But let's go ahead and see how these games compare in matchmaking and team setup. Alright, so the next topic I want to talk about with both games is matchmaking and how team setups kind of work and all of that. So starting off with Paladins, you have the tank, flank, damage, and support class. Now, you are not required to queue up for any of them, so essentially you can just start and select your game mode, and there's no queue system, so you can play whatever you want, which I will get into that a little bit later, and I will go way more in depth just in a little bit here. Now, for Overwatch, you are required to pick a role and queue up for a role. So, for example, you can queue up for tank, damage, and support. These queue times are pretty quick on Overwatch, especially if you are a tank or a support. Now, it does get a little lengthy if you are playing damage. Usually speaking, you're going to wait typically about 5 minutes, and that's on console. I don't play it on PC, but typically speaking, at least on console, for damage, you're going to be waiting about 5 minutes or so. Now, let's go ahead and get into team setup. Now, let's go ahead and cover the team setups and how many players are on each team. So we are going to start off with Paladins. Each team will have 5 players on them. Now, with no queue system in Paladins, you are going to have a lot of different team compositions, and in my opinion, it is the worst issue in Paladins, and you will see why. Maybe it's just me, maybe you guys will think differently, but you have 5 players on each team with only 4 classes. I cannot tell you how many times I have played support or tank, and for example, if I am playing tank, there has been numerous times where you don't have a support because everyone goes DPS, or vice versa if you are a support player. There are pretty good likelihood that you're not going to get a tank. And this doesn't happen all the time, but this is just something to really think about. A lot of people tend to play DPS quite a bit in Paladins, at least in my experience with it. So that is just a huge issue. You are essentially hoping someone picks either, tank or support, because those are not the most popular classes, unfortunately. Why, I don't know. But let's go ahead and cover Overwatch. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the Overwatch team setups compared to Paladins. Now, with Overwatch, you're going to have 6 players per team, and you're always going to have a balanced team composition, meaning you are going to have 2 tanks, 2 damage, and 2 supports. Now, the reason why I think this is better than Paladins is because you will never have the issue of not having a support or tank, unless a player just decides to quit or just throws the game, which does happen. Now, these are just some important things I wanted just to kind of talk about whenever it comes to matchmaking and how team, setups work and all that. Now, let's go ahead and cover the heroes for Paladins and Overwatch. Alright, so let's go ahead and cover a couple of heroes from Overwatch and Paladins to see how they stack up to one another. So we're going to start off with Paladins. The Paladins heroes are very fantasy and mythical based. So, for example, you have Genos, who floats and uses space and time to heal his allies. Another example is Tiberius, who is a tiger that is a weapons master. He uses a blade and uses his mobility to deal a lot of damage to enemy players. These are just a couple examples. There are a ton more, but I just want to give you some examples of kind of how the heroes and paladins are. But let's go ahead and move to Overwatch. Alright, so moving to the Overwatch heroes. Now, for the most part, they're going to be centered around science and technology. Just to use a couple of examples, Sigma, who is a tank, he uses an experimental barrier to protect his allies, and then he uses his kinetic grasp to suck up incoming projectiles, and then it converts it into a personal shield just for him. Another example would be Moira, who uses the biotic grasp to suck the life out of the enemies and use it to heal her allies. These are just a small percentage of the heroes, both from Paladins and Overwatch. I just wanted to give you kind of a couple examples of what to kind of expect from both heroes from Overwatch and Paladins. And I will say this, I wish this was expanded a little bit more upon, especially in Overwatch. I am very happy that Paladins has a very fantasy-based cast of characters, if you will. It's actually quite fun to use those characters. But let's go ahead and hop to the player base. Alright, so let's go ahead and talk about both games' player base. Now, they are both alive and well. You're really not going to have any problems finding a match in either game, unless it's like DPS, like I had said earlier in the video in Overwatch. But let's go ahead and take this a step further and really dive into what some of the player base is kind of like in both Paladins and Overwatch. Alright, so let's go ahead and start off with Paladins. Now, I know I may or may not catch some heat saying this, but this is just my personal experience. Maybe you've had different experiences, but I have ran into so much toxicity on Paladins way more than Overwatch, and that's just like I said in my experience with it. Just to give you an example, more oftentimes than not, especially if your team's having, a really hard time, or, it's a close game and someone makes a mistake or whatever, someone doesn't get the healing that they need right away, you are gonna experience a lot of chat spam and just non-stop. Essentially, your whole chat log is going to be filled up with this lovely combination of words that simply say, "You rock, you rock, you rock, cancel that, cancel that, cancel that." Now, yeah, like it is like kind of funny at first, that you do, I mean, even myself, I got like a nice little chuckle out of it here and there. But because there is no queue system, this makes it hard to have all the roles filled. And when the roles are filled, sometimes, like I said, you do not have a tank or a support, unfortunately. That's just how it works sometimes. And with this, sometimes it can lead to a very toxic game experience just because there's always that person that is just constantly spamming all of that nonstop, and it just kind of gets a little annoying. Now, mind you, this does not represent the whole player base or anything. I'm just saying my experience with it, and it just can be a mess sometimes. So if you do decide to play Paladins, just be ready for that. But let's go ahead and cover Overwatch. Alright, so now stepping over to Overwatch in my experience with it so far. I really haven't ran into really like a lot of in-game toxicity, really. I mean, really the only thing that you can do compared to Paladins, for example, is just kind of throw the game or just make, your team's life a living hell in that regard. But I really haven't experienced it too much. Now, I know, old school Overwatch, like way before I got into it, like I know I know it could be pretty toxic at times, especially in voice chats. So, I mean, I'm not really, the guy that's always in voice chat or anything. I mean, I'm not like, the fucking grandmaster player or anything. I hover around gold at best. I'm just a casual player that just plays it a lot. But anyways, let's go ahead and cover what game is better. Alright, so let's go ahead and talk about, in my opinion, which game is better. So let's go ahead and cue up the drum roll. Alright, so a short answer is Overwatch, and it's really not close. The only not the only reason, but the biggest reason for me is the fact that Overwatch has a queue system, and it makes your teams way more balanced. Now, whenever I say balanced, I'm not talking about, we have to run a shield or, all different, fucking sorts of metas or anything. I'm just strictly saying you're always going to have tanks, you're always going to have DPS, you're always going to have support, as where Paladins, unless you're with, like, a group of friends or something, you really don't know what you're going to get. It's very... it is a pain in the ass sometimes, just me being 100% honest, and sometimes in order to be a team player you may be forced to play something you're really not interested in. So for example, it's like if a lot of people go DPS and Paladins, or like most of the team, and someone picks support, you probably would be better off playing tank, even though most people are going to play whatever they want to play. But there are a whole host of issues of why Overwatch is, at least in my opinion, better than Paladins. But that's the main reason, not to mention, it just looks way more polished and all of that. And then, I mean, I know it's not really fair to, like, say that, just considering Paladins is a free-to-play game. So, I think Overwatch is better in general, and I truly think that Paladins has a lot of potential if they would, either balance out matchmaking somehow or, eventually add a queue system. I think that would make Paladins a lot better. But anyways, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments if you guys prefer Paladins or Overwatch. And also, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. I'll catch you guys later.